This thing looks absolutely trash because it is. Welcome to our new wicked 1947-ish Willys Jeep. This thing looks absolutely trash because it is. This thing was sitting in someone's garage and it ran and drove at the time. And then about 6 years ago, the entire house burnt down, and unfortunately the Jeep went with it. It seems to me that the fire was a lot hotter on this side than the other side because the tires are completely melted off over here, whereas on the other side not so much. The problem with the fire burnt Jeep is that they're just not structurally sound anymore, or anything that's fire burnt for that matter. Once metal heats up to a certain temperature, it loses its strength, and it's just no longer safe to operate something like that on the road. Now, a 4x4, a little bit different story if you're strictly just off-road, but you would never want to get in a Lamborghini that burnt to the ground and try to go 200 miles an hour in it. What's sad is this thing looked like it was a pretty decent Jeep before it burnt to the ground. I mean, there's a little bit of patchwork, but overall the body's not terrible. My windshield is a favorite part. This sucker just sloping down because the fire got it so hot that it just melted it. Even the glass melted on this thing and reformed itself to interesting shapes. Of course, as with any other Jeep purchase, they seem to think I'm the trash man and just chuck everything in here as possible to get off their property. The steering wheel still steers. The axles actually rolled when we put it up on the trailer, and get this. Transmission shifts, transfer case shifts. So really, I think the guts of this thing are pretty decent until you get under the hood. It's still got a flathead engine in it, and I will admit that I cheated before doing the video, that I sanded off the serial number of the block, and it says 4T on it, which means four-wheel drive Willys truck, so it's not the original engine, and the engine head's actually off a Ford GPW. Look at that carburetor, melted onto the intake manifold. Unfortunately, the radiator took one for the team as well. She's all melted and definitely not usable. My favorite part, I will have to say, is this radiator hose, how it's melted halfway open. You can kind of see the ridges from the other side. So nothing in the engine bay is good at all. But who can forget the battery? Look at that sucker. It looks radioactive. The cool thing is that the frame looks relatively decent on this. It's definitely not one I would ever want to use in a restoration because it's been heated up so bad. But the frame horns look pretty straight. The bumper is pretty straight. I did notice that the leaf springs got so hot that they have arched upside down. Normally leaf spring goes this way, but this one's going that way. I kept watching this thing on Marketplace. I'm like, no, you don't need any more projects. Let it go. Don't need a burnt down vehicle. Well, I'm like, you know what? I do need a burnt down vehicle. So I went scoop drop. I left it up there for 2 weeks. Nobody else wanted it. So we're going to see what we can't do with this sucker. The coolest thing about this vehicle is that it's 100% guilt-free. There's absolutely nothing of value on this thing for a nicer Jeep that you'd use in a restoration. Start looking for an engine, order brake parts for it, and then we can get it running, driving, stopping. Whatever happens after that is anyone's guess. Took the tranny cover off. The bolts around the tranny, we're going to go and pop off the shift cover. I've got it in neutral and it's ready to go. If I had to bet what we're going to see, I had a little bit of water because this was sitting outside. Water runs right down the shift tower right there. But there's a lot of mud and paint around here, so I don't think it got super hot. Let's see what we find. Wow, it's actually not bad. Now a normal person would be like, oh, there's a lot of rust in there, I wouldn't run that sucker, but you know what? I've seen much worse transmissions than this, and they all ran. So I have all the hope in the world that this thing's actually pretty good. And the fact that we still have liquid in here means that the seals aren't so destroyed that all the water, leaked out, or oil or whatever is left in here. So I'm thinking we're going to go clean that sucker up, Just spray a little brake clean on there, scrub it a little bit. Yeah, you know, the bearings aren't going to last super long because all that rust and crap in there, but you know what, for what we're working with, this is one of those cases where a clean workspace is a safe workspace, because I found screws and glass, you know, the glass from the windshield and the glass from all these gauges laying around. Lift her up, clean her up, and then we'll start checking out this end. We're going to pull the wheel off, hub off, and then we're going to check the wheel bearings inside of here. Alright, pulling out the first bearing. Alright, see what she looks like. A little bit of water falling out of the bottom here. Yeah, let's not want to come out. I see the brake shoes are dragging a little bit, but not enough to hinder us. Alrighty. Check that out. That bearing is not bad. I mean, it's not even pitted. These are better bearings than what I took off the submarine. That's a good hub. We might be in luck. I cannot believe it. Absolutely amazing. Let's see if I hold the back on, the camera can focus. The seal on the back of this is actually in good shape too. Let's feel what this bearing's like. And that bearing might be a little. Need to repack them for sure. We might be in luck. We might be in luck. I'm going to turn the steering wheel, see how hard it is. I mean, not the greatest. With the condition of the hub on the end of the axle, I'm like, you know what? We need to check and see what's inside the differential cover. So we're going to pop it off quick and look inside. That is pure water coming out. No oil, just water. We might be screwed. Oh, let's see. Huh. There's the inside of the differential. There is the cover, which is... Holy, that's a lot of metallic. I don't know. There's a lot of metallic in there. So what this tells me is this axle was probably bad before it burnt down. There's a lot of chunks of grease, and it's all very, very shiny. And it smells horrendous. You're lucky you can't smell on YouTube, because this is the worst smell I've ever smelled. That is pure shiny out of the differential. I have removed the passenger side wheel hub, and what I found is that the wheel bearing is excellent on here. I'm kind of leaning towards just cleaning the thing out, sending it. Front axle went so well, quote unquote. We're going to go and try the rear axle. Alrighty, here we go. Oh, we got a little bit of water, but we got a lot of gear oil here. Oh yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Now that's interesting. This axle didn't have much water in it, but you can see on the top there's like a lot of dirt around the pinion right there, which is really odd to me. A lot of pitting. I'm sure the bearings are pitted on this rear end. What I'm going to do is take off the hubs on both sides because this axle turns over pretty hard. I think the brakes are dragging on it. And once we get the brakes off, we'll turn it over by hand and see what she does. But at this point, it's making the front axle look like an angel. The current problem I'm having with the rear end is that it's not turning over. I put a breaker bar right on the hub, and I cannot get it to move. Pushing pretty good, bending the bar, and the axle is not spinning over on either side, so I'm going to pull these hubs off. I think the brakes might be adjusted so far out that they're catching the drum. and we're gonna hope that's the case. Holy moly! Look at that. That brake shoe's all messed up. The axle shaft itself looks pretty decent, but this stuff is definitely trashed. That was way too easy to take off considering how hard the axle is to spin over. So like I was saying, that hub came off super easy. Normally what happens is these brake shoes are adjusted so far outwards this way that it catches the drum and it keeps that axle from spinning. But those drums popped right off, which means there wasn't any drag on this. So I thought, okay, you know, it seems a little odd. I went underneath there with the pry bar and I stuck it right between the drive shaft around the yoke right there and just pushed as hard as I could, and I got the axle to spin just a little bit, and that's about all she had. We could probably run the axle for a very short time. The problem we're going to run into is that it's going to take so much power from the Jeep. It's going to create so much heat. I mean, it's not even going to last long enough to have fun with it, so we absolutely need to swap out this rear axle, and I think it's because that differential is just filled with dirt, and I'm sure the carrier bearings are just rotted in place. The front axle is a different story. We're going to have to think about that as we continue on. Every few days I walk over and I move the steering wheel back and forth a little bit. I'm going to start spraying PB Blaster down here, some grease along the joints, and I think that's going to free up a lot better. I mean, we got to keep the fire steering wheel. That's too gangster. Here's our rear axle for the Jeep. Of course, we've got the almighty Lincoln locker. Look at that. That's a pretty good weld in there. I didn't make any plate to connect all the gears together. I just welded them because I was like, you know, I'm too lazy for a plate. And really, once again, nothing of value really lost. Now if you can see, there's a lot of crud down in this axle. I'm sure has been eating away inside the bearings over here. And I can only imagine how they look on the inside. And then every time I dump this axle back and forth on the forklift, a lot of water's coming out of this bearing. So who knows what she looks like, but it'll be good enough for who it's for. Decided to lube up the axle before we popped on the differential cover, and I thought, you know what, let's try turning it over by hand. And it is crunchy. And right there, we got a dead stop. And it's hard to power through, so she's going to be an excellent axle to bury in the mud. This is a GPW head, which is the only reason why we're going through the effort. Because this thing's probably worth $100 and we can resell it to buy other parts. I removed all the head studs. Now we just gotta pry it off. So you have to pull it straight up in the air. And what do we have? It's really not that bad. I mean, the cylinder walls aren't all rusted. I mean, the valves, obviously this engine was never going to run. You can see a lot of rust build up on here, I'm assuming because of the fire. And same thing, a lot of rust on these. But overall, I mean, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Truthfully, I think this block is probably savable. The junk engine is finally out of the Jeep, and I've got to say, the clutch doesn't look so bad in this thing. If you look at the flywheel, it's got, you know, grease on it instead of pure rust all the way around, which is pretty good. There's a lot of oil down here, which tells me the rear main was probably leaking right into the clutch and bell housing area, so that would have just slipped had the engine ever ran in the first place, which obviously she was not going to. I mean, look at that coil. Absolutely blown apart. But overall, the engine's a lot better than what I expected it to be. As for the chassis, she's looking extremely bare. I mean, not much left up here. The next step is to work on the front end. What I need to do is get all the brakes done. the new rear axle installed, and the front leaf springs. Now that our pedals and braking system's all out in the open, we need to go through and figure out why these pedals are moving together instead of independently, because we can't have our clutch pedal moving the brake pedal once this thing's all said and going. We finally had the leaf springs off the Jeep. This has been the most miserable part of the process thus far. For some reason, the shackles were extremely stuck inside of the little shackle mounts right here on the frame. You see this half is still slopping around inside that I need to knock out with an air hammer. But they do not want to come out. And you can see I've been sweeping underneath this Jeep every time I work on it, and just more and more dust keeps falling underneath here. I actually had to end up cutting out the little bushing on the shackle right here because it would absolutely not come out. I see it's tweaked a little bit, but no problems for what we're doing with it. And we've got brand new front leaf springs. I've been keeping these around in the shop just in case I ever needed them. This tells you how old they are. They have a J.C. Whitney sticker on them. I mean, these things are super, super old. I'm out here working on the Jeep doing the front axle, and I see all this water just start pouring onto the ground. I'm like, where in the world's that coming from? And I look up, and it's coming out of the front of the transfer case where the front drive shaft comes out. So I'm assuming the output seal just let go, and all that water is just ripping right out of there, which definitely sucks because that means the transfer case is not going to last that long with the seal leaking that bad. But alas, we continue on. I completely forgot to film it yesterday, but I've got the rear axle in the Jeep. This is the replacement axle. I've started on the front brakes here, and the inside of the knuckle is not very promising. When I popped the bolts out, these lower bolts, a bunch of water came out of the axle, and there's a lot of crud and rust in there, and the balls feel decently tight. There are 5 balls that hold the ends of the axle shaft onto the main section, and if these things are worn out, you can actually pop all those balls out and they fall on the floor. Then you gotta try to reassemble the thing. Just not worth doing. So that's what the inside of that looks like. That spindle's absolutely rusted on the driver's side. You can tell that the bearings probably weren't very happy sitting on there. And I've got the backing plate off the axle, as you can see, and I'm soaking the bolts in PB Blaster because they're kind of cruddy, and I don't want to ruin the threads taking these nuts off. So I got PB Blaster going on those lower bolts, and these two are lobes that are adjusters for the brake shoes. I've gone over brakes plenty of times on my channel, so if you want to see a video about that, there's one in my blue Jeep that I do. We've got the front brakes on the Jeep, really parts that are way too nice for this chassis. I've got the front passenger and the front driver on. Those are ready to rock. We've got the new leaf springs on. We got some shackles that at least hold up on the front end. What I've got to do now is get the rear brakes on and then repack the wheel bearings and the hubs, slide those back over. Pretty boring, probably not going to film that. I am super, super proud. Check this out. The pedals move independently of each other once again. Brake pedal moves, clutch pedal moves. I've just been soaking that sucker in PB Blaster, and it's only taken me about 2 days. I've got to say it's working really, really well. You know, I'm just coming down here and soaking the bottom of the shaft that the pedal's right on. Then I've also been soaking the steering box and all the little steering linkages. I've been letting the PB Blaster pool up inside of all these little sections. And what you can see is the steering, it's not the greatest by any means, but it is moving a lot better than what it was, and I think this is going to be plenty good enough to ride around in. I just got done picking up a Hobart welder, found this pretty local to me, and the reason why I got this is because it has a Willys Jeep engine, and I must say it matches the patina of the Jeep perfectly. There's some differences with the generator engines. You see the thermostat housing kind of points upwards a little bit. The carburetors are flipped around on these. Just subtle little things like that. We officially have our generator engine ready to go into the Jeep. Really all I had to do was unbolt the large legs that bolt to the generator engine up here. And then I took off the generator bell housing and I installed a Willys Jeep bell housing backing plate. I don't know exactly what that would be called. So put that on. We needed a Jeep flywheel with an accompanying bell housing. I used the flywheel off the engine that was originally in the Jeep. That way I know that the bell housing and the flywheel all match up together, and the starter. Got a new clutch and pressure plate on there. I flopped the carburetor, a 180. On a generator, these come facing the opposite direction, and then they connect to linkage on the governor system up here. I removed the governor system, got a new fuel pump on there, and then there was a lot of gunk in the spark plug holes, so I went through, soaked them all in PB Blaster, got the gunk loosened up, cleaned out the screwdriver, vacuumed it out, pulled out the plugs, cleaned them up, put them back in. On the Jeep side of things, I installed a new throwout bearing, cleaned up the clutch fork, and got a new throwout bearing spring back here as well. Greased everything, got it all 100% ready to go. We are finally getting so close to driving this thing. It's felt like so much more work than I anticipated, but then again, aren't all projects. I've got the engine installed, all bolted up to the bell housing. I was messing with starters, seeing which one would work, and I had to use one of my rebuilt ones I had stashed around. Got the new coil on there. I've got a brand new thermostat inside the thermostat housing, and now the only thing I'm not super proud of is the radiator setup. You can see I've got welded brackets right here, and then I got some brackets over there. Well, this is a CJ2A frame. This is a CJ3A radiator. You know that because, camera focuses here, that the radiator bolts up on the front section right there, which would bolt to the back of a CJ3A grill. A CJ2A radiator has tabs that go underneath the frame, and it bolts onto those tabs. I didn't have any 2A radiators laying around. I had a couple 3As, and this one has been botched a little bit. Someone's definitely done some repair job right here. I haven't welded in a long time, but you know what? That ain't bad at all, is it? I've also got the fuel lines run on the Jeep, the one coming from the tank and then the one going to the carburetor. Got the carburetor all bolted up. I've got our choke cable on. I've got a return spring for the throttle. I've got the pedal installed. There are some structural integrity issues going on here. We might have to adjust later, maybe. But we do have the brakes all the way installed. They are bled, and I've got to say the copper lines are sweet. Just got to get those clamped down. Right here I have a can of Rust-Oleum multicolor texture. What I did is went to the store and I grabbed a piece of rust off the Jeep, held it up to all the spray cans, and that was about the closest I can find. I found these tires and wheels on Facebook Marketplace for, I think I paid $300 for them, then I had $50 in gas going to get them. Obviously, they're not the greatest tires in the world. The front two are just about one step above from being bald, but I did put the good ones on the rear. These have a decent amount of tread left, and whilst I put these on the rear, because the differential is welded, we got a little bit of a Lincoln locker back there. And according to this tire, you can't slip. So that means when we're out in the mud, pure traction, baby. Pure traction. So we're going to make everything match the wheels here. Or should I say, the rest of the Jeep. A little bit of advice on an old radiator like this is you always want to check the overflow tubes on these. They're actually a hard line that comes right underneath the fill cap, and they run all the way down to the radiator, and then they just drop down to the ground. A lot of times these things are smashed, like this one is smashed off right about here, which is no good at all. If you don't really care about how the Jeep looks too much, like I'm in this situation, I'm actually going to cut this off with a grinder. Then I'm going to take a rubber hose and run it down. And if you want to get really crazy, you can mount like a ketchup bottle over here, put the hose from here into the ketchup bottle, and then you have a little overflow tank. We are finally at the end of the Jeep build. I've got everything ready to rock. The Jeep runs, drives, and stops. So this thing is obviously ready to go to an off-road park with zero testing ahead of time. But we've got two sponsors in today's video. And the first one I'd like to introduce is Auxbeam. There is Auxbeam. So Auxbeam sent us a free light bar to put on the Jeep. I was really concerned about ruining the aesthetic of the Jeep. I didn't want to put headlights in the thing because I feel like those big googly-eyed headlights would just ruin the look of the thing. And Auxbeam reached out to me and they're like, hey, we love your videos. We want to give you some sponsorship. Check out our website, see what you want. So I measured the width of the Jeep bumper right here, and I found a light bar that matched a perfect description that sits in between the frame rails, but I've got it mounted just before the bumper so that way it doesn't look goofy sitting on the front end or anywhere else or up on the windshield, anything like that. Not only did we get the wicked little light bar, we've got another setup here from Auxbeam, and check this thing out. This is a switch panel. I did not have time to install this into the Jeep. We're probably going to play with this in a later video, but this is a 2, 4, 6, 8 gang panel from Auxbeam. So you could run the entire Jeep off of the system, which was my original plan. I just did not have time. I'm leaving for an off-road trip tomorrow, and the Jeep just got done. And then you've got decals that you can put whatever you want on the buttons. Put power, headlights, fuel, etc. Stick them on there, so when you hook up to the Jeep, you press power button, the Jeep would turn on. Maybe a horn, maybe headlights, start button, etc. It's got all the control boxes. It's got a resettable fuse. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better little setup. I really got to give a big thanks to Auxbeam for sending us this stuff. This would look great on the Jeep. Now, your boy's got a second sponsor for the video, not one, but two. So this is Gulu. This is a battery jumper pack. Now, when I'm messing with all these old Jeeps, as you can see, they're not much to look at, so most of the time you don't put a ton of work into them. And 99% of the time, I don't add charging systems to them because I buy them, get them running, and then resell them. Now, this Jeep actually did wire a charging system, but I just did it tonight. Meanwhile, I've been driving the Jeep off of this battery, which is just about dead, and it barely cranks the Jeep engine over. So Golu has sent me a battery jumper pack, which I'm really, really excited. This is probably my most needed object on the whole channel because the battery jumper pack I've been using has been going dead. So what we do is we turn it on here. I'm at 97% because I charged it earlier. So I'm going to hook up the battery jumper pack to the Jeep. So there's our positive. Then we've got our negative terminal right here. And it's also got a light right here. Super cool feature. Now once you got it connected to your battery, you press the boost button. It says ready right on it. Now we're going to go ahead to the Jeep and see if she cranks over. Oh, look at that. The battery jumper pack is the bomb. I've got to say, I absolutely love it. Again, I want to give a big thanks to Golu and Auxbeam. A big shout out for sponsoring the video. You can see on the Golu battery jumper pack, look how small that is compared to how big the one I've been using for about a decade. I mean, we're talking a third of the size. And this Auxbeam setup, I mean, this thing is perfect for setting up a Willys Jeep, for getting the bare functions on a switch panel, testing out a wiring system, and this thing is just excellent. Let alone the light bar, which we're going to put this Jeep into test. We're going to do the first test drive of the Jeep at night because I'm loading this sucker on the trailer and we're taking her wheeling tomorrow. And it's obviously dark outside because, as always, I'm far behind the schedule. So we're going to see what this light bar really does. Really can't deny how bright this light bar is. I mean, I love my original headlights on all my other Jeeps, so man, it's so nice to be able to see out here. I can change the colors of the LED light depending what I pick on my phone. But look at that, we got purple, we got a little bit of orangish, we got some blue going on. I mean, this thing is just awesome.